The human bodyguard shed blood to protect her, and the alien diplomat ignored protocol. The knife was already in the air when Cole moved. No dramatic shout to freeze. 1 second he was standing 2 steps behind Ambassador Vela, and the next he was a wall between her and the blade. His left forearm catching the flat of it and sending it spinning into the marble floor of the reception hall with a crack that silenced every conversation in the room. The attacker, a man in a catering uniform, face twisted with something between fury and desperation, reached for a second weapon at his hip. Cole's hand closed around the man's wrist before the weapon cleared the holster. A sharp, controlled rotation. A sound that made 3 nearby diplomats wince and look away. The attacker went down. Cole stood over him, breathing steady, his forearm bleeding where the blade had caught the skin on the deflection. Blood ran down his wrist, dripped from his knuckle, landed on the pale stone floor in a small. He did not look at it. He turned to Vela. She was standing exactly where she had been standing. She had not moved. Not one step backward, not one flinch, not one hand raised to cover her face. Her 4 eyes, 2 silver, 2 gold, arranged in a vertical line on each side of her face the way a human's are not, were all fixed on. Her secondary arms, the smaller pair she kept folded at her midsection when in formal settings, that was the only sign she had registered what happened. His voice was flat and professional. "We need to move." She did not move. "Ambassador, you are bleeding," she said. Her voice was low, not loud enough for anyone beyond them to hear. The hall was beginning to buzz again now. Security personnel pushing through the crowd, the sharp clicks of earpieces activating. A cluster of human staffers rushing toward the man still on the ground. "I am aware," Cole said. "This is not the place to discuss it. You caught the blade with your arm." "Yes, deliberately." He looked at her then, really looked for a half second, in a way he normally rationed because looking directly at Vela for too long did something inconvenient to his concentration. Her species, the Varath, had a bioluminescent quality to their skin that shifted with emotion. Right now she was cycling through pale blue and white in rapid pulses, which Cole had learned in 4 months of close protection work meant something between alarm and something his translation guide described only as the Vorath equivalent of cognitive overload. "Yes," he said again. "Ambassador, we need to move now. This venue is compromised." She moved. He stayed at her left shoulder as they crossed toward the private exit his team had mapped on. Arrival. His hand was not on her. He never touched her unless contact was unavoidable. Had learned early that the Vorath found casual contact from strangers to be deeply uncomfortable. But he was close enough that if something came from the left, he would intercept it in under a. "On the other side of the hall, I have eyes on 2 more individuals moving toward your position, both in service uniforms. Both wrong." "Copy," Cole said quietly. "Alternate exit." He angled them toward the maintenance corridor without breaking stride. Vela followed without question. That was one thing he had noted about her early. She was not the kind of diplomat who argued with her security detail in the middle of an active. She might argue later, at length, with great precision and a vocabulary that made his head hurt. But in the moment she moved, when he said move, he appreciated that more than he had words for. The maintenance corridor was gray and harshly lit after the amber warmth of the reception hall. Cole's arm was still bleeding, and he pressed it against his side, feeling the fabric of his jacket soak through. "How bad?" Vela said, a statement as if she were assessing. "Manageable." "That is not an answer. It's the answer I have right now." He checked the next corner before they took it. "I'll have a better one in about 6 minutes when we're in the vehicle." She was quiet for then. "You could have moved me instead." He did not slow his pace. "No. It would have been simpler. Avoid the blade entirely. I don't grab you." "Cole." "Ambassador." He said her title the way he said most things to her, even careful, with a kind of deliberate patience that had nothing to do with condescension and everything to do with the fact that she was his principal and he had promised, in writing and in practice, to bring her home in one piece. We can debrief this fully when we are in a secure location. Right now I need you walking, and I need you quiet. She went quiet. They reached the vehicle bay. His second partner, a quiet man named Gil, who had the useful quality of never looking surprised, had the car already running. Cole put Vela in the back, checked the perimeter, got in the front. In the rearview mirror, he caught one brief image. Vela sitting perfectly straight, all four eyes fixed on the back of his head. Her skin still doing the pale blue-white pulse thing. He looked back at the road. What was not fine? What he would file away and deal with later, in private, in the specific mental compartment he kept for things that could not be allowed to matter during working hours, was the way she had said his name, not agent or officer or any of the 7 formal address structures the Vorath diplomatic protocol manual listed for interactions with human security personnel, like she had been saying it for years. The debrief lasted 2 hours and 20 minutes, which was 40 minutes longer than it needed to be because the Interplanetary Diplomatic Security Division sent 3 people who all believed they were in charge. Cole sat at the end of the table and let them talk. He had given his report, clean, factual, timed to the second. And now he was watching the 3 of them redistribute credit and blame in real time while a medic worked on his arm under the table, pulling the edges of the cut together with adhesive strips that smelled like antiseptic and something faintly chemical he could never identify. Vela was not in the room. She had been taken to her suite on the upper level of the safe house, accompanied by her personal aide, a young Vorath named Isin, who had the look of someone who had chosen diplomacy as a career and was regularly startled to discover what it actually involved. "The attacker has been identified," said the woman from IDSD, whose name was Pratt and who had the clipped energy of someone who had consumed too much coffee and too little sleep, part of a movement opposed to the land use agreements currently under negotiation. "How did he get credentials for the event?" Cole asked. "The kind that meant no one wanted to own the answer. That is under investigation," said one of the men. "Your instinct to use physical interception rather than extraction was unconventional," Pratt said. She was looking at the adhesive strips on his arm. The handbook recommends extraction when extraction is viable." Cole: "The ambassador was between me and a crowd on 3 sides. If I'd grabbed her and pulled, I'd have pulled her into the knife's path at a different angle. The intercept was the better geometry." Another brief silence. "You'll have a full written analysis by 0700, he added. "With diagrams." He did not mean the last part as condescension. He genuinely found diagrams useful. Most people in his line of work did. The 3 IDSD representatives seemed uncertain how to take it. The debrief dissolved eventually, the way these things did. Not with a conclusion, but with a gradual mutual agreement to be somewhere else. He knocked on the door of the ambassador's suite. 2 sharp knocks, the pattern her aide recognized as him. He was young. Cole still found it difficult to accurately gauge Vorath ages, but something about Isin read as inexperienced in the way that had nothing to do with intelligence, and everything, too, do with accumulated hours. And he stepped aside immediately. Vela was at the window. The safe house looked out over a stretch of water, a gray bay, and she was standing with her back to the room, all 4 arms in an unusual configuration. The primary arms were crossed at her chest, which was standard. The secondary arms were extended slightly outward and down. Palms, the Vorath equivalent, the wide, flat sensory pads at the end of each limb. Facing the glass. Cole had seen this before. Once, after a difficult negotiation session that had ended badly, and once when she had received news from home that she had not shared and he had not asked about. It was not in the protocol manual. He had simply cataloged it. "Isin," he said quietly, "give us the room." Isin looked at Vela. Vela's secondary arms shifted slightly. Something in the angle that Cole read as assent, though he could not have explained how. And the aide slipped past Cole and pulled the door closed. Cole crossed to the window. He stood beside her, not in front of her, so that she could see him in her peripheral vision or ignore him entirely. The bay was dark, lights from the far shore reflected in long broken lines. The man was part of an organized cell, Cole said. Not a lone event. IDSD is running the thread now. I know, Vela said. Ussin told me. Okay. A pause. Long enough that Cole began calculating the appropriate moment to say goodnight and leave. Why did you do it the way you did it? She said. He understood which moment she meant. I explained this downstairs. You explained the geometry. She turned from the window, looking at her directly in the low light of the suite, with all four eyes oriented toward him. It was a thing that required a specific mental steadiness that Cole had spent 4 months cultivating. I want to know the rest. There is no rest. It was a tactical decision. You didn't hesitate. Hesitation is trained out. That is not what I mean. Her skin was doing the pulse thing again, but slower now. He didn't have a translation for that one in his manual. I have had 3 security details before, because the diplomatic corps finds it politically useful and because humans are currently the best at close protection work for reasons that are frankly alarming to most species who examine thee. None of them moved the way you moved. They would have, Cole said. Any competent agent would have made the same call. You didn't look at the blade. You looked at me first. For a fraction of a second before you moved, you looked at me. Cole said nothing. You were checking my position, Vela said. It was not a question. Yes. And then you stepped in front of it. Yes. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something he had not seen her do before. She raised her right secondary arm, the smaller one, the one that Vorath used for careful and considered gestures rather than the broad communicative sweep of the primary, and touched the side of his injured forearm, just 2 fingers of the sensory pad resting there above the adhesive strips. He went very still. My species does not bleed, she said. We have fluid, but we do not lose it this way. Through the surface, she looked at his arm and then up at him. It is strange to me that you do this, that it is just a thing that happens to you. It closes, he said. His voice was even. He was proud of that. It heals. I know. She lowered her arm. I looked it up. The night after I was assigned to this post, I read the full biological summary for your species. A beat. It was very long. We're complicated. You are terrifying, she said. It came out with a precision that suggested she had considered and rejected softer words. The data on human pain tolerance alone, the way your species simply continues despite physical damage. She stopped, looked at the window, then back at him. I want to say that I'm grateful. For this? Cole looked at her for a moment. Try one anyway, he said. It was not a professional thing to say. He was aware of that the instant it left his mouth. Something happened in her expression. The Vorath equivalent of a smile was a lowering of the secondary eyelids over the gold eyes, a barely perceptible softening. And he catalogued it the way he catalogued everything about her. She spoke a single word in Vorath. He did not know it. He would look it up later, when he was alone, and he would find that it translated to something in the rough vicinity of the specific gratitude, owed to someone who stepped between you and a thing that was meant to end you, knowing they might not step away. Right now she said it, and he nodded as if he understood, and the room held both of them in the low blue light above the dark water. The second attempt came 11 days later, and it came from inside the building. Cole knew something was wrong before he could name why. It was the kind of knowing that lived below conscious thought. A pattern disruption, a wrongness in the texture of a normal morning. He was in the corridor outside the ambassador's suite at 6:42, running the standard pre-departure check before Vela's morning session at the negotiation table, and the guard posted at the stairwell end of the hall, a man named Felix, steady and reliable. 8 months on the building security rotation, was standing 4 inches too far from his post, not a dramatic deviation. Cole had measured the positions of every fixed guard in this building on day 1. He measured them again every morning as he walked the corridor. 4 inches was enough. He kept his pace, did not change his expression, spoke into his earpiece so quietly that a person 6 feet away would have heard nothing. "Donna, Felix is displaced." Donna came back instantly. "I have Felix on camera at the east entrance. He's been down there for 9 minutes. The man at the end of the corridor was not Felix." Cole reached Vela's door. He knocked, the pattern. And when Isin opened it, he stepped inside, closed the door, and turned to find Vela already dressed for the session, standing at the small table where she took her morning briefings, primary arms at her sides. "We have a problem," Cole said. She looked at him. Did not ask what kind. Did not make the situation worse with questions he hadn't gotten to yet. She waited, which was, he had decided, at some point in the last 11 days. One of the things he respected most about her. "There is an individual in this corridor who should not be here. I need you and Isin to go into the inner room and stay there until I tell you otherwise." "How? Long?" "I don't know yet." She looked at him for one more second. Then, "Isin." The aide appeared from the side room. Vela said something to him in rapid Vorath, and Isin nodded and gestured toward the inner door. Cole crossed to the window, staying low, and looked at the angle of the street below. Escape route assessment. The building's secondary security team was visible at the main entrance. "Cole, I'm getting anomalous badge activity on levels 3 and 4. Someone's been cycling a single credential through interior access points in a pattern that would make sense if they were mapping clear corridors." "Building security is aware?" "I'm telling. They're slow." A pause. "There are 3 of them, we think. 1 in the hall you're in. 2 more on level 3. 3 was a professional number." Cole checked his sidearm without looking at it, by feel. Then he opened the suite door. The man in the corridor, not Felix, the wrong man, had moved again. The corridor was narrow. That worked in Cole's favor. The man had speed but not space. Cole drove him into the wall, controlled the weapon hand, put him down in 3 seconds with a kind of efficiency that looked simple from outside and was. Cole dragged the man into the nearest room. A linen storage closet. The 2 men from level 3 came into the corridor at a run. Cole let them pass the suite door, gave them 1 step of confusion, and dealt with the situation. When building security finally arrived, Donna had been right. They were slow. The corridor contained 3 individuals in various states of being no longer a problem. And Cole was sitting on the floor with his back against the wall outside Vela's suite, pressing his hand against his side where the second man had gotten a short blade in before Cole had ended the engagement. It was not deep. He was operating on the reasonable assumption that it was not deep, because if he assumed the alternative, he would make different decisions about the next 30 seconds, and those decisions would not help anyone. Donna arrived at a controlled run, took 1 look at his hand against his side, and said a word she usually reserved for extraordinary circumstances. "It's not deep," Cole said. "You don't know that. I'm choosing to know it. That is not how injuries work." "Donna." He used the same tone he used with her in the field, even, flat. The tone that meant we are still in the middle of something and feelings come later. Check the stairwells for any 4th party and then come back. She went. Returned in 90 seconds. Clear. Cole got to his feet, knocked on the suite door. Silence for 3 seconds. Then Isin's voice, muffled. "Is it safe?" "Yes." The door opened. Isin looked at Cole, looked at the corridor, looked at Cole again, and his skin went a color that probably meant something significant in Vorath that Cole did not have time to interpret. Vela appeared behind him. She looked at Cole's hand at his side, at the dark stain on his jacket. Her skin was very still. Not the rapid pulse he had seen before, but a deep, sustained blue that had gone almost violet at the edges. He had never seen that color before. "I need to make some calls," Cole said. "Then we need to reschedule this morning's session. The negotiation teams will not be happy." "Cole." Ambassador? Stop talking about the... She stepped into the corridor. She did not look at the three men on the floor. She looked only at him, all four eyes, the way she had in the vehicle the night of the reception. Fixed. Total. The kind of attention that felt like a physical thing. You need medical attention, she said. I'm aware. Then I would like you to stop standing in a corridor and go get it. I will. In a few minutes. Now, he looked at her. She was not asking. The word had the weight of something that did not expect negotiation. He told himself later that he had complied because she was his principal, and it was an instruction from his principal. He was a professional. He followed relevant instructions from relevant people. He told himself that for approximately 48 hours before he stopped finding it convincing. The thing that broke protocol was not dramatic. It did not happen during a crisis. There was no blade, no wrongly positioned guard, no corridor that smelled like something was about to go badly. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in the fourth-floor conference room of the Planetary Relations building, 40 minutes into the seventh round of land use negotiations that had been going nowhere for 6 weeks, and it happened because Vela smiled at the lead negotiator from the opposing delegation, a human man named Arthur Bray, who had the practiced pleasantness of someone who had spent 30 years making disagreement feel like agreement. Bray had said something that was technically a concession and structurally a trap, and Vela had smiled at him. That Vorath near smile, secondary eyelids dropping over gold eyes, and begun to respond with what Cole recognized as the specific register she used when she had already mapped the next 6 conversational moves and was prepared to counter every one of them. Cole was at the perimeter, standard position, 3 feet from the door, watching the room. His job in negotiation settings was to watch the room, not the talks, not the words, not the political texture, but the bodies. He was watching the room. He was also, in a private and completely unprofessional part of his mind, watching Vela take Bray's trap apart, sentence by sentence with the calm efficiency of someone, diffusing something that had never actually been dangerous to her. He had a problem. He had been aware of having this problem for approximately 3 weeks, which was when he had looked up the Vorath word she had spoken in the safe house after the first attack and read the translation 4 times to make sure he had it right. He had the problem clearly categorized. It was inadvisable. It was a violation of professional distance, and it was not going anywhere on its own. These were the facts. He had arranged them in a neat row in his mind and looked at them regularly, which had not helped even slightly. The negotiation session ended at 4:15. Vela remained at the table, reviewing something on her datapad, as she always did after sessions. She liked to annotate her notes while the conversation was still fresh, a habit that Cole had learned to account for in his post-session timing. Isin waited near the door. Donna was in the hallway. Vela looked up from her datapad, directly at Cole. "What is a problem?" she said. He kept his expression neutral. "Ambassador, you have been standing against that wall for 40 minutes with the same expression a Vorath would make when they have categorized something they do not know how to file." She tilted her head. The small secondary arms unfolded slightly. "I have been watching you watch the room. You watch it differently than Donna does. Donna watches for threats. You watch for threats and you watch something else." Cole said nothing. He was calculating the number of responses available to him and finding that the honest ones were inappropriate and the appropriate ones were dishonest. "I'm going to ask you a direct question," Vela said. "Vorath protocol for direct questions requires direct answers. I understand that is not universal. You may decline." "Go ahead," he said. He had no idea why he said it. "Do you experience this assignment as a difficulty?" Not the question he had been bracing for. "No." "A difficulty," she said, as if testing the word, "is not the same as a danger. I am asking if being here, in proximity to me, creates a conflict in you." The conference room was empty except for them and Isin, who had suddenly become very interested in a point on the far wall. Cole looked at Vela. At all 4 eyes, The deep, unreasonable blue of her skin in the afternoon light coming through the high windows, at the way she held herself, upright, still, with a particular quality of stillness that was not passivity, but the opposite of it, a coiled attention that he had stopped pretending he didn't notice. It came out clean, factual, the way he said most things. Her skin did something he had not seen before. Not the blue-violet of fear, not the pale blue pulse of alarm, but a slow, warm shift toward something between amber and green that spread from her collarbone. In the translation guide, this color range was listed as a category he had read once, and then skipped because it had not seemed relevant. He wished he had read it more carefully. "I want to tell you something," Vela said. "And I want to be clear that I am saying it as myself, not as the ambassador. The title goes at the door." Cole nodded. He did not trust his voice to do something useful right now. "My species chooses assignments the way your species chooses." She paused, searched for the word. "We do not separate from the people we work beside. It is considered, in Vorath terms, a very old-fashioned instinct. Isin finds it embarrassing." From across the room, Isin made a sound. "But I have spent 4 months with a person who stepped in front of a blade for me, and then argued with my security debrief team about diagrams, who told building security they were slow and was correct, who sat on a floor with a wound in his side and still checked whether the stairwells were. I read the full Vorath Human Interrelation Protocol document last week," she said. "It is 800 pages and deeply unhelpful. It spends 6 pages on handshake guidance. A beat. There is a section on what is called cross-species professional entanglement. The summary advises against it on 27 different grounds." Cole watched her cross the hum. His heart rate was doing something his training had never covered. "I want you to understand," she said, stopping at a conversational distance, close enough that he could see the amber-green deepening in her skin, "that I am a diplomat. I have read those 27 grounds. I have considered them carefully." She looked at him with all 4 eyes. "They are not persuasive." He looked at her for a long moment. "I'm your security detail," he said. "Yes, that's a significant complication. I am aware. I have cataloged it." A pause, dry and precise, along with 18 others. Something happened in his chest that he did not have a clinical. "I need to think," he said. "I know." She moved past him toward the door. "Cole." "Yeah. You are the first person in 4 months who has not treated the way I think as a thing to be managed." She walked out. He stood in the empty conference room for approximately 90 seconds. Then he followed her, because that was his job. The protocol violation was logged on a Wednesday, the one where Ambassador Vela of the Vorath Diplomatic Corps, in the middle of the final session of the land use negotiations. The session that was supposed to conclude 6 weeks of deadlock, stood up from the table, walked to where Cole was standing at the perimeter wall, and said in a clear voice that carried across the room, "I need a moment with my security lead." Every head in the room turned. Arthur Bray stopped mid-sentence, which was something Cole had not seen happen in 6 weeks of negotiations. Vela did not look at them. She looked at Cole, who looked back at her with the expression he used when he was professionally neutral and, "In the corridor," she said. "Ambassador," Cole said quietly, "we are in the middle of—" "I am aware of what we are in the middle of." Her voice was even. "I am also aware that the agreement on the table has a clause in subsection 14 that would functionally remove the prior land use rights of 17 settlements, and that no one at this table has mentioned it because they are hoping no one will notice until after signing." She looked at the room, briefly, without particular heat. "I have noticed." Silence. Bray, to his credit, kept his face entirely neutral for about 4 seconds. Then something shifted in his expression that was not quite guilt and not quite calculation and was precisely the combination of both. "Ambassador," said the lead human negotiator from the third-party mediation team, a woman named Claire who had spent the last 6 weeks being diplomatically pained by everyone in Equal measure. If you have concerns about specific language, the appropriate process would have been disclosure when the clause was. We are past that. She turned back to Cole. Corridor. Cole followed her into the corridor. Donna looked at Cole. Cole gave her the look that meant I have no more information than you do. And Donna gave him back the look that meant this is your situation, and I want no part of it. Vela stood in the corridor, very still. Tell me I'm not wrong, she said. Cole thought about it for precisely the amount of time it took him to review what he had watched. Over the past 6 weeks. Not the words, because that was not his job. But the patterns, the way Bray's team had managed the pace of sessions, the topics they repeatedly steered away from and then returned to only when other things had been. You're not wrong, he said. A Vorath exhale sounded slightly different from a human one. Lower, from the secondary respiratory system. But the function was identical. Relief, or something like it. I want to walk back in there, she said, and put the correct language on the table. The one that does not pretend that 17 settlements are an acceptable cost. She looked at. This will extend negotiations by at minimum 3 weeks. My superiors will not be pleased. The mediation team will not be pleased. Bray's delegation will spend those 3 weeks being unpleasant in ways they have not yet attempted. I know, Cole said. You are not going to tell me it is the right decision. You didn't ask me. She looked at him. The amber green in her skin was steady, which in the time he had been cataloging her colors, he had come to understand as a kind of groundedness, a settled quality, something more deliberate than calm. I did not. A beat. You're going to tell me it creates a security complication. 3 more weeks is 3 more. Yes. Can you manage it? He thought about the blade in the reception hall, the wrong man in the corridor, the knife at his side that had turned out to be exactly as not deep as he had decided it would be, which was the only time in his professional life he'd been grateful to himself for being. Turned toward the door. He had not called her by name before, not without the title. She turned back, and he watched the amber green deepen slightly. The settlements, he said. The 17. Yes. Are any of them Vorath? She held his eyes. No. Then you're walking back in there to fight for people who aren't yours. In a negotiation that doesn't require you to, against people who were hoping you wouldn't notice. Yes, she said again. He looked at her for a moment longer than was professionally advisable, which was becoming a habit he had stopped fighting. Let's go. They went back into the room. What followed was not pleasant. Bray's team made 3 attempts to table the discussion and redirect to already settled items. Claire spent 40 minutes trying to find a procedural middle ground that would let everyone exit, gracefully, which was a reasonable instinct applied to an unreasonable situation. 2 members of the 3rd delegation left the room for 20 minutes and came back looking like they had received instructions they had not enjoyed. Vela sat at the table and did not move. She spoke when she needed to speak. She waited when waiting was the correct tool. She dismantled Bray's reframings with a precision that Cole, standing at the perimeter, watching her, thought was the most thorough thing he had ever seen done without anyone raising. At 9:47 in the evening, Bray's lead counsel asked for a 15-minute recess. The recess lasted 40 minutes. When they came back, they put a revised subsection 14 on the table. It was not perfect. Vela read it, annotated it on her datapad, made 4 specific requests for changes. 2 were accepted immediately. 1 was negotiated for 35 minutes. 1 took until midnight. At 12:03 in the morning, the final language was agreed. Claire looked like a person who had been holding a structural weight for 6 weeks and had just been allowed to put it down. Hands were extended and taken with various degrees of enthusiasm. When it was done, when the room was beginning to disperse, Bray crossed to Vela. Cole tracked him automatically. Old reflex. But the man's body language had shed the practiced pleasantness, and what remained was something more straightforward. You saw it in the first read, Bray said. It It was not quite admiration and not quite accusation.